priority.
Move on quickly.
The number 2 priority that will run concurrently with number 1 is we must look at what is Nairobi in terms of its strategic direction. What we want to make Nairobi. To me, Nairobi is a center that must be like a magnet for all the counties of the Republic, for all the regions that we within this place. It is also a center whereby the entire international community must be able to say, wait a minute. We have housed Habitat. We have housed UNEP in this country. Isn't it a contradiction that the 2 most important United Nations agencies are in Nairobi, but in an environment that is anything than habitable, that is anything that is environmental friendly? So I would like to see that Nairobi has good plans that will make sure that when when you go to Nairobi, you know this is the transport section, the transport infrastructure. This is the strategy for it. For example, when you talk about transport, one thing that has to be dealt with, and this has to be done concurrently with the national government, is the question of, can we afford a chaotic situation that we have as far as transport is concerned? Because unless you have got effective and efficient transport system, it is impossible for people to be at work on time. And if people are not at work on time, then you have a serious problem. The second thing I can tell you within the transport issue is the question of roads. We must expand the roads in a way that provides free, easy movement, which is not there today. The other thing that I'm concerned about, the third thing, is the issue of education. To me, any society that is going to go anywhere, it must put emphasis on education. And I can tell you, education will be one of the most important things, because I am here because I've gone to school. Majority of people in this country, and this country, for example, who will never be here because they don't get access or opportunity to go to school. For me, I'm going to be a governor that will be an education governor. I must make sure that we will create opportunities and facilities that will guarantee a child who is in Mathare, a child who is in the most disadvantaged areas of the Republic of the country, will have an opportunity to get quality education that they can see as an investment for their future. And finally, the issue of health. Healthcare is fundamentally most important, and we must address the issue of health.
Well done. Question here from Godfrey Mutesh, and he says, we thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. My question is, how will you then control rural-urban migration? And how will you ensure elaborate and affordable public transport in the city? So you need to elaborate in terms of what strategy exactly will you say? And he asked basically in terms of, do you support privatizing public transport? Is that the reason why we are chaotic these days? But start first with rural-urban migration. How will you tackle that? It's a question from Godfrey Mutesh.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. When you talk about rural-urban migration, I think that is something that has been a phenomenon of the past, and is still there and is still present. And I think that it is something that the county governments intended to address. In other words, they're supposed to make opportunities almost equal everywhere, so that people do not then conglomerate in Nairobi, what we'll call the urban. In other words, we have very many urban areas that are going to be there in the 47 counties. And therefore, I think that is not an issue that right now we can say is very serious. In any case, the more attractive you become to people, the better it is, provided you can be able to provide them with a good environment to work. And you're saying you're going to create more jobs, so you can attract more people to provide these jobs to spur development. And therefore, that is an issue that I think is something that is a process addressed. Public transport. You recall, Jimmy, that in the early 80s, and I'm sure when Karanja here will agree with me, is that public transport was quasi-government driven. And we had seen a lot of good service. However, somewhere along the line, we got it totally wrong. We left it to the privateers and you know, completely withdrew our hands. We became hands off, legs off, and therefore the whole thing became a chaotic situation whereby everyone does what they think. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because how do you determine how many vehicles are going to be in, for example, route number 46?
I see.
How do you determine how many vehicles are going to be going to Buruburu? How do you determine how many vehicles are going to, for example, the Gong route? And I think that whereas now, currently, we should encourage what you call the public-private partnerships. We should have a structure that is created and regulated by government, and I'm talking about our county government, so that we are able to involve the very private sector. And I'm talking about the very people who are there, because I've had this issue of people saying that we should remove them.
The 14-seater matatus.
We should remove the 14-seaters, but still make those people who are driving those 14-seaters buy and drive the big buses. However, under a structure. That structure is the one that is going to address the current problems that we have. The problems that we have of fares, problem we have of timekeeping, the problem we have of timeliness, orderliness, cleanliness, and just making sure that we have order in the system.
Absolutely. Very quickly.
Two issues you have raised, and that is
rural-urban migration.
Rural-urban immigration. First of all, let's realize that we have a Bill of Rights that allows for freedom of movement.
Yes.
If people are attracted to Nairobi, it is because there is something people admire or believe is going to respond to their needs as far as Nairobi is concerned. And there's very little a governor can do. However, I believe that out of the 47 governors, there's going to be caucus of governors.
Right.
And we need to get together and be able to say, wait a minute, we want to develop our respective counties, but there is a possibility that if you don't do your work at a particular county, it's likely to have a push effect on the other counties as far as demands for resources, demand for services are concerned. So I believe there is going to be a very good working relationship between and among the governors in order to create a situation whereby we are saying, let's really make sure we create a conducive environment in every county so that people don't necessarily have to run away from a county of Nyeri, come to Nairobi. I think that is going to happen. However, what is important as far as this county movement, rural-urban migration is concerned, it requires national government to come up with policies that will create environment of development. Because a lot of times when people move to a particular area, it's because they are looking at and seeing there are opportunities in a given area. And where I am, there are no opportunities. So it's incumbent upon the national government and the 47 governors to work together towards developing the country in a wholesome context. That is one of the things that is going to solve the problem. Now, as far as the transport is concerned, now, let's be mindful of one fact. Globally, there is no country or any metropolitan area that has ever effectively developed a transport system on a private basis. Government always subsidize transport. It's a very important artery as far as the economy is concerned. What has happened in this country is that the national government has completely abandoned investment in the area of transportation system. Looking at the railways, look at the railways. There's nothing. All right? So we are talking about a total breakdown as far as the national government responsibility to provide efficient and effective transport system. That's the beginning.
I see.
That's the beginning. The government must take responsibility.
Absolutely. Very quickly, just to clarify, this is a debate about the position of governorship for Nairobi. So the chairman, Karanza Kabage, and the CEO of NCBD are not running mates or partners. They're actually each running concurrently in as far as the position for governorship is concerned. So send in your questions on 2442. We appreciate them very much. Also on Facebook page, that's at Power Breakfast Show. Question here, right? You talk about creating an attraction for Nairobi. How will you do this in terms of attracting investment? Please elaborate.
Thank you very much.
Timothy, yes.
The very tenets of our three pillars are the ones that attract investments. Number one, if you provide security, that spurs investment. And why do I say that? I say that because world over, the governments and I mean environments that have been secure. For example, Rwanda. We talked of Rwanda. very secure, you find that that environment spurs investment automatically. There's no question about that. Number two is what we are calling the infrastructure. If you provide good power, good raw power, if you provide good transport, if you provide, you know, an efficient environment in terms of circulation, that automatically spurs investment. And by the way, I'm not just talking about foreign investments, even local. The reason why somebody should come from Kisumu and build a factory here,
yes,
or prefer to build a factory in Nairobi and not in Nyeri, are the very tenets of you know, county-driven governance. In other words, we provide a good environment not just for the outsiders, but also for the insiders. So they find it more attractive.
Allow me to just move on. And I know you know a lot of what you've said basically would be the same thing in terms of this. Let's move on very quickly because there are many questions pertaining, especially to issues of prostitution, issues of housing, and so on and so forth. Let's start first with demolition housing. These are questions from one of our viewers. Demolishing housing is unsafe. In unsafe places like Sinai and next to airports. What are your thoughts about housing? We house the biggest slum in Africa. People have been talking about you know, putting up housing in terms of, you know, clearing out of slum areas. What are your your strategies? Let's start with Karanja Kabal.
Yeah, I think that question is very, very important because it addresses the whole issue of unplanned development.
Unplanned, yes.
Unplanned development, or development that is not really intended to address the challenges of habitation or habitat. And this is why I said in my remarks that first and foremost we need to look at the entire planning of the city, because first you ensure that the planning code are obeyed by everybody. Nobody should be having you know, you must eliminate an anarchy. In other words, where if you say this street is for a given activity, it has got to be for a given activity. If it is for a factory, it has got to be for a factory. If it is for a school, it has to be for a school. If it is for a hospital, it has to be for a hospital. You cannot have mumbo jumbo situation like we have in many respects. Therefore, to me, planning is fundamental. And everybody knows we are planned for this particular activity in this particular area, and there is no substitute. It doesn't matter who you are, you must comply with the law. So we must make sure that our planning laws, regulations, and codes are intact, and everybody complies with that. The other thing that we need to do is the whole issue of corruption in this country. Because you see,
somebody's asked that actually.
Yeah, because the issue of, you know, this country, let me tell you, it has such enormous resources, but we are not developing. For example, if you look at the entire economy of this country, which 60% is in Nairobi, it's only $66 billion. $66 billion with a population of about 40 million people. Just compare that with Korea. 50 million people with a population of 50 million people with an economy of $1.5 trillion. Trillion. And when you look at Kenya, we are not unable to, we can develop this country. But we must make sure we call upon everybody, from the President of the Republic of Kenya to the lowest human being. You must learn to do two things. One, you have to be disciplined. Two, you have to be hardworking. Three, forget rent seeking. Corruption has to be eliminated without any mercy whatsoever.
That is your promise as governor.
That's my promise as a governor. And I want to say this, so that people can understand where I'm coming from. I am saying this. If today it is announced that elections period has started, 5 months before the election, I'll personally publish what I own and who I own. And I'll do that every year. Not that it should be put somewhere in a official office or document. It must be in public. Because the biggest problem with this country today is that nobody knows who their leaders are, what they own, who they owe, and therefore, if there is any corruption that is taking place, it is compromising the taxes of the people of Nairobi. And let me also say this. I also want to declare to anybody who wants to vote for me, I have no money for them. Do you understand? Because if you begin by giving people money to elect you, the question I ask myself, you are buying a position to go and provide public service? Never. It should never happen.
Yes.